Hey parents, I'm a parent too, and I make all kinds of videos with parenting tips, advice, and real-life hacks. If you like what you see, show some love and hit that subscribe button. Let's get started. There is a kind of pain that is never spoken of, a pain that hides behind smiles, prolonged silences, and repeated apologies. It is the pain of parents who feel they have lost their place in their own child's heart, not because they disappeared, but because they stayed and yet are ignored, disrespected, cast aside. It is the pain of those who gave everything and still feel they must beg for a drop of love. Carl Jung understood the complexity of this bond. He knew that love between parents and children does not guarantee reciprocity, that the human soul is full of shadows, and that even the purest love can become lost in the labyrinths of resentment, projection, silence, and distance. That's why he spoke firmly and compassionately. Do not beg your children for love, not because you do not love them, but because begging destroys you. Because when a father or mother lowers themselves for affection, they lose the dignity built over years of giving. And because above all, true love cannot be begged, for it is given freely, never under emotional blackmail or humiliation. So many parents today live with this hidden pain. They wait for a call that never comes. They endure cold words as if swallowing stones. They smile to hide the sadness of realizing they've been forgotten. They try to stay close even when they are no longer wanted. And they do all this in the name of love. A love that may be mistaken for dependency, guilt, or attachment. This video is not a condemnation. It is a clear embrace. It is a call to reconnect with your own dignity. It is an invitation to understand that to love does not mean to accept everything. That being a father or a mother does not oblige you to tolerate disrespect, and that often the greatest act of love is silence, a boundary, a space. Carl Jung said that when a relationship becomes toxic, even between parents and children, it is a sign that projections and unconscious wounds are at play, and that trying to resolve this through pleading or submission is like trying to extinguish a fire with gasoline. What is needed is a different stance, a different awareness, a different level of love, one that begins with you. In this video, we will walk together through 9 deep recommendations not to harden your heart, but to protect it, to heal, to remind you that even in the absence of your children, your soul remains whole, and that no one, not even they, can take away your worth. You are not alone and you are not wrong for feeling what you feel. But from today on, perhaps, you will be able to choose to suffer less and live more in peace, in strength, and with the dignity your story deserves. Stop justifying what cannot be justified. When we love deeply, it's easy to fall into the trap of explaining everything away. Absence is excused as tiredness. Rudeness is reframed as immaturity. Painful indifference is rationalized as just a personality trait. And so, step by step, we turn wounds into routine, disrespect into habit, pain into the norm. Carl Jung warned that the unconscious creates masks to survive pain. And one of the most dangerous is denial, the inner mechanism that prevents us from seeing what is right before our eyes, because accepting the truth would be unbearable. But when we deny, we do not heal. We merely postpone the inevitable. And the longer we postpone, the more we find ourselves in situations that diminish us. Justifying the unjustifiable is like numbing a deep wound. On the outside, it may seem like everything is under control, but inside the soul is bleeding. Dignity begins to slip through our fingers, because there is something deeply destructive in accepting crumbs of love as if they were a feast. You need to ask yourself, if this weren't my child, would I accept this kind of treatment? If it were a friend or a colleague, would I normalize this absence, this coldness, the way they speak to me? Often we hold on to such relationships because we believe that a child's love justifies everything, but it justifies nothing. Love does not cancel out the need for respect, and respect must exist even in relationships between parents and children. Justifying the unjustifiable also prevents the other person from growing. When you turn a blind eye to everything, even in silence, you support your child's emotional immaturity. You reinforce the unconscious idea. Parents endure everything. And that idea is toxic because no one is made to endure everything, least of all you. This illusion must be broken. You must look at things soberly. Acknowledge I was hurt. It was unfair. It was painful. And acknowledging that is not self-pity. It is healing. It is giving the wound a name, so it can finally begin to heal. This is not about cutting ties, and it's not about cultivating resentment. This is about reclaiming your voice, setting boundaries, understanding that you can love and still protect yourself, that you can wish your children well without having to hurt yourself in the process. Stop justifying what cannot be justified. Because each time you explain away your pain as something normal, a part of you gets used to living as less than you truly are. And you did not come into this world for that. You came to love, yes, but also to be loved truly, mutually, with respect. Love is not begged for, it is given freely. You may have given your child everything. Your time, affection, sleepless nights, effort, silent sacrifices no one will ever see. You may have fed, clothed, cared for, and guided them and still felt that their affection in return is shallow, distant, or completely absent. That hurts deeply. But it's precisely in that moment that a clear line must be drawn, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. True love is given. It is not demanded, it is not begged for, and the love between parents and children is no exception. Jung taught that the essence of love is freedom, the freedom to give and the freedom not to, the freedom to come close and the freedom to move away. When love is genuine, it flows. It doesn't need to be forced. It is not born from pressure or insistence. It grows from recognition and truth. To beg for love is to bring the soul to its knees. To plead for something that, if it must be asked for, has already ceased to be love and has turned into an emotional obligation. But love is not a currency. Love is a gift. And if your gift is not received, you must understand the problem is not with you. The problem lies in the other person's ability to receive. Believe this. Your dignity is worth more than any hug given out of pressure, more than any phone call made out of guilt, more than any visit where the body is present but the soul is absent. Great wisdom is found in continuing to love, without begging for. Love in staying close without sacrificing yourself, in keeping your heart open without degrading yourself. This does not close doors. On the contrary, it opens a quiet space to which the other person may one day choose to return. And if they do return, you will know. It's not out of pity, not out of remorse, but from genuine love. You do not need to stop loving, but you must stop emptying yourself for the sake of love. Because when love is begged for, it loses its nobility. But when it is given freely, even without return, it becomes an act of greatness. To love freely means saying, I am here. I love you, but I also love myself. I want you close, but not at the cost of my peace. My presence is a gift, not a demand. And this kind of love, even if not immediately understood, holds a transformative power because it is calm, mature, steady, and one day perhaps the one who walks away today may remember, except that they have wounds you cannot heal. There is a quiet sense of guilt that weighs on many parents, the feeling that they failed, that they could have done more, that their children's distance, coldness, neglect, or indifference is somehow their fault. And so they begin to blame themselves inwardly. They revisit the past again and again, searching for mistakes. They take on responsibility for pain they may never have caused. But Carl Jung teaches us something important. Every person has an unconscious, an inner world filled with memories, traumas, conflicts, and wounds whose origins are not always clear. And no matter how hard you try, no matter how much of yourself you've given, there is suffering that is not yours, and therefore you cannot heal it. This is hard to accept because those who love want to fix things. They want to heal. They want to restore the bond. But not everything is up to you, because sometimes what your child feels toward you says more about them than about you. They may carry resentments born of other pains, unmet expectations, wounds they project onto you. And when there is projection, there is no clarity. They don't see you, they see their pain reflected in you. You can try to explain, but someone who is deeply wounded hears everything through the filter of resentment. And any sincere gesture on your part may be seen as manipulation. That's why at certain moments the greatest form of love is to allow the other person to walk their path without control, without trying to save them, without the urge to fix things. Jung said that every soul has its own time of awakening, and that the highest form of maturity is accepting your helplessness as part of love. To love does not mean to be able to do everything. To love means to remain present even from a distance. To respect the other's timing, to understand that some scars must heal internally in their own time with tools you cannot provide. When you accept this, the pain begins to ease because you stop fighting what is beyond your control. You stop blaming yourself. You stop carrying responsibility for everything and begin to breathe. To respect yourself, to remember that even if you are not perfect, no one is. You deserve peace. You can offer love, presence, deep listening, but you cannot heal a wound the other person is not yet ready to see. And that's okay. That too is a profound lesson. To be available but not responsible for saving. To accept that your children have wounds you cannot heal does not mean giving up on them. It means loving consciously. Saying in silence, I'm here, but now the next step is yours. And that, believe me, is one of the most elevated forms of love. Set boundaries, even in love. There is a common and very dangerous belief that parental love must be so unconditional that it tolerates everything. That to love your child means accepting any behavior, swallowing any words, endlessly forgiving, forever remaining silent. But this idea, though it may seem noble, comes at a high cost, the cost of self-neglect. Carl Jung said that where there are no boundaries, there is psychological confusion. And in parent-child relationships, that confusion can turn into an emotional prison. When love becomes a field without boundaries where everything is tolerated in the name of family ties, harmony is not created there. What arises instead is imbalance. Setting boundaries does not mean you don't love. It is an expression of self-respect, an act of maturity, a quiet statement that says, I love you, but I also love myself. I'm willing to accept, but not willing to endlessly wound myself. Because there is a thin line between love and submission. And crossing it even out of love means losing yourself. Love without boundaries turns into guilt and guilt into control. And control has nothing to do with love. Many children often unconsciously use the family bond as an excuse for hurtful behavior. They say what they want, disappear when they want, ignore, demand, judge. And when you as a parent say no, the reply might be, so now you're against me. But the truth is, it's not about opposition. It's about standing with yourself. Yes, you love. Yes, you forgive. Yes, you want the relationship to heal, but that does not mean accepting everything. A healthy boundary is an invisible shield that protects your peace. It says this, no, not with me. I am your father, your mother, not your emotional punching bag. And when you set this boundary, you are not pushing away. You are educating, you are teaching. And though it may not be understood immediately, understanding will come that love is not passivity. That family is not a license to hurt. That connection is not a right to disrespect. Jung asserted that any relationship without clear boundaries will sooner or later become unhealthy. And healing begins the moment you allow yourself to set those boundaries with firmness, but with love, with clarity, but with calm. You can continue to love, to pray, to wish the best. But you are no longer obligated to accept what harms you. Not out of pride, but out of wholeness. Because sometimes the greatest act of love is teaching the other how to love with respect. And that lesson is not taught with words, but through your stance, through your presence, through your boundary. Meet your own life. Again, for many years, perhaps even decades, you lived for your children. You woke up for them, worked for them, gave up your desires for them, postponed plans, stayed silent about your dreams, all out of love, out of pride because it felt right. And it truly was right. But there comes a time when life gives you a sign. It's time to meet yourself again. Carl Jung said that many people fall spiritually ill because they lose connection with their own center. They live revolving around others, children, spouses, problems, and forget they have an inner world that also needs to be nourished. And what is not nourished slowly dies. You are not only a mother. You are not only a father. You are a soul with desires, talents, and interests that go beyond care and sacrifice. And if your children have now grown distant or don't appreciate what you gave, it may be painful. But it is also a liberating invitation to turn your attention back to yourself. What have you stopped doing? By always being available. What have you always wanted to learn, to experience, to express? Which parts of yourself have you forgotten because all your light was directed toward others? To meet your life again does not mean abandoning anyone. On the contrary, it is a powerful example. It shows that life does not end when children grow up, that the world does not disappear when they walk away, that there is still me alive longing to live. The desire to keep children close often stems from a lack of meaning outside of that role. But you can have a full life that doesn't depend on their constant presence. You can create new habits, new connections, new projects, reconnect with what was forgotten, or discover something new. Jung called this the second half of life, a period when attention shifts from what you do for the world to what you do for yourself. Self-discovery, the soul, what is no longer tied to a role but to your essence. You are not too old and it's not too late. In fact, you may be at the exact moment when you can once again become the center of your own story. Yes, children are important, but so is your life. Yes, their love is precious, but your love for yourself can offer far more than you imagine. When you meet yourself anew, everything changes. The emptiness lessens, emotional dependence weakens, and even your relationship with your children can be renewed because now you are not asking. You are simply living, and those who live authentically attract respect. Attract presence, attract love without pleading. Break the myth of eternal debt, one of the most poisonous emotional myths between parents and children. The quiet, often unconscious belief that children owe their parents, that they must repay, that they must take care, that they must love just as strongly, that they forever owe a debt for what they were given. But Carl Jung teaches, when love is clouded by a sense of obligation, it loses its lightness, and a bond built on duty becomes a prison for both the one who demands and the one who owes. You may have given everything, and you did your youth, your energy, sleepless nights, quiet labor, hidden tears. You carried the world on your shoulders for their sake. That is great. That is noble, but it's important to understand. Your children owe you nothing. This may sound harsh, but it is liberating, because as long as you believe they're in your debt, you will keep waiting. You will be disappointed. You will tie your peace to something that may never come, and that destroys. The truth is, becoming a parent was your choice, or at the very least your experience. You gave because you wanted to, because you loved, because it felt right, and that was beautiful. But if love was a gift, it cannot become a demand. Children are not born to fill the voids of their parents, not to compensate their pain, not to serve as a source of pride, joy, or return. They have their own path, their own unconscious, their own shadows. And every time you view them as debtors, you push them even farther away. True love does not demand repayment. It longs for presence. It longs for truth. It longs for freedom. When you break the myth of eternal debt, something deep happens within you. The resentment fades, disappointment gives way to acceptance, and over time, love begins to flow again. Because now it is light, not heavy. It simply is. This doesn't mean devaluing yourself. It means setting yourself free, freeing others from the invisible chains you yourself created, freeing yourself from expectations, freeing love from obligation, and by doing so allowing what is true to remain by choice, not by guilt. Jung said that relationships flourish where there is space for the other to be themselves, and that space opens when we release the chains of emotional debt. You don't need your children to acknowledge everything you've done. You only need to acknowledge it within yourself and to honor yourself for it without expecting repayment, without expecting return. Because what is truly great is self-sufficient. Turn the pain into inner growth. You may feel anger, you may feel sadness. There may be days when you wake up in silence and ask yourself, how did it happen that my child, my daughter, my son became distant from me? That pain is real. It is human and it must be lived through, but it does not have to be eternal. Carl Jung said that pain, if not understood, turns into bitterness. But if accepted, if faced with courage, it becomes a seed of wisdom, a seed of transformation, a seed of growth. The suffering you feel today can become an opportunity not to harden but to deepen, to come closer to yourself, to uncover layers of the soul that were dormant and now, in the face of emotional mourning, become accessible. Because yes, this is mourning, not for a physical death but for emotional absence, for what could have been but wasn't, for the image of family you dreamed of but which fell apart in silence and distance. But Jung reminds us that there is a strength that is born only when we go through pain with clarity. When we stop resisting, when we stop looking for someone to blame, when we begin to ask, what is this pain trying to teach me? What within me needs to be seen even if it hurts? What can I learn from this absence that cannot be changed? It is precisely then that pain begins to transform. It stops being poison and becomes medicine. You discover that you can live without certain presences. You realize that life goes on even without the good morning you were waiting for. You come to understand that there is a peace that doesn't depend on others' responses but on reconciliation with yourself. Transforming pain into growth is an act of spiritual courage, a decision that even if love cannot be returned, it can still become a source of change. That even if the bond cannot be restored right now, the soul can still rebuild itself clearer, calmer, more centered. This is the alchemy of the soul. It is when you look at the wound and say, I will not abandon you, but I will not let you define me either. You came and shook me, but now you will teach me. And so step by step, what was once pain becomes strength. What was once loss becomes wisdom. And what was once silence becomes space for your inner voice. Be an example of dignity and independence. The world knew you as a father, as a mother, as a caregiver, a foundation, someone who gave, who solved, who supported. But now perhaps you feel invisible. Perhaps it seems that once you were no longer needed, you lost your value. And it is at this very moment that many fall into an emotional trap, trying to win love back through dependence. But Carl Jung taught, the soul matures when it chooses dignity over despair, when it holds its ground even in the face of absence, when it understands that begging for love does not strengthen the bond, but instead destroys one's sense of self. It is a powerful thing to become a quiet example of wholeness, calm, and dignity even without recognition, without applause, without a response. The true legacy a father or mother can leave behind is independence and freedom from guilt. Image of a person who lived truthfully, who was present with honor even when left on the sidelines. Children sooner or later remember. They remember the steadiness, the way you met pain with grace, how you did not humiliate yourself, did not play the victim, did not manipulate but remained someone who lived with dignity. And that leaves a deep mark. Even if they cannot yet express it in words, even if they don't know how to come back, even if they are still immature or consumed by their own conflicts, your dignity is a lighthouse. It does not shout, it does not demand, it simply remains. And over time, the world learns to respect what stands firm even without support. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to chase being loved. You are already enough, even without a response, even without return. Be the example you would have wanted to see. Be the quiet anchor that teaches more through silence than demands. Be the one remembered not for despair but for quiet strength, for choosing to live with a pure heart and an integrated soul. Jung said that true influence is born from the center, and the center is found when you stop revolving around others and finally begin to revolve around yourself. Leave space for love to return if it is true. After all you've been through, after all you felt, a quiet question may remain in your heart. Will they ever come back? Not just in body, but in heart. With real presence, with unguarded attachment, with sincere words, with the recognition you never voiced but always longed for deep inside. The answer is maybe, and that is precisely why you must leave space. Carl Jung said that when something is forced, it loses its symbolic value, and love, especially between parents and children, needs freedom to be restored. If a return is to be sincere, it is only possible when you do not block the way with expectations, demands, or accumulated resentments. Love that returns must find a space that is pure, quiet, mature, without demands, without judgment. Leaving space does not mean throwing the door wide open. It means keeping it unlocked from the inside, with your home in order, your soul at peace, and the clear conscience of a person who did everything possible. And now, let's go, because letting go is also loving. To let go means to say you have your own path and I trust time. Letting go means stopping the search for love where it hides in order to allow it to return by choice, not out of pity. Letting go means surrendering control over the outcome of the story and simply being present, available, yet whole. Many parents reconnect with their children after years of silence, Sometimes awareness comes in moments of loss at birth or during a crisis. Sometimes distance causes pain and forces the other to mature. Sometimes life itself teaches what you could not say. But all this will happen only if you do not carry the burden of the past as a barrier between you. If you have transformed pain into wisdom, abandonment into self-discovery, absence into peace. If love is true, it will find its way. But it needs to know it will be met not with demands, but with calm acceptance, not with resentment. That it will be a gift, not a debt. Leave space for love to return. Space for forgiveness, space for something new, even after long silence. Meanwhile, keep living, keep caring for yourself, keep creating your light, because even if nothing returns, even if no one comes, you have already met yourself, and that is the greatest return. You gave the best you could, loved as you knew how, made mistakes like all humans, achieved more than was acknowledged. And yet at some point on the journey, you felt rejected, forgotten, devalued by those you loved most, your children. That pain is real, but it no longer has to consume you. Carl Jung showed that the greatest transformations of the soul happen in silence, in shadow, in solitude. It is precisely when the world turns away from us that we are called to turn inward to regain the dignity that no one can take away, the value that does not depend on applause. The love that begins within you no longer needs to be begged for on your knees. You don't need to chase attachment that is not given spontaneously. You can love and at the same time preserve yourself. You can wait without closing off. You can be present but with boundaries, clarity, and self-respect. To love does not mean to forget yourself. To love means to remember yourself even when the other leaves. You can still wish for reconciliation, of course, but now with a calm heart, a peaceful soul, and the awareness that life goes on and you still have much ahead, living, creating, feeling. You are more than the role you played, more than the silence you hear, more than the absence of a response. You are presence. You are a story. You are strength. And if someday that love returns, let it return by choice, not out of guilt, not out of demand, but out of recognition. And if it does not return, may you remain whole, calm, steady, and radiant as only those who have gone through pain with dignity can be. If this message touched your heart, please like it and share it with someone who may be silently suffering from a love that does not return. Write in the comments which of these recommendations you needed most today. Your story may comfort another soul, and your testimony can pave the way to healing and awareness. Subscribe to the channel to walk together with me on the path of wisdom, courage, and truth. Here we do not seek magic formulas. We seek depth. We strive to restore what no rejection can erase, the value of your own existence. And remember, you were not created to beg. You were created to love wholly, freely, and with respect. And it begins now. Thanks so much for watching, parents. I really appreciate your time and support. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one.